at Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiage. This is your official economic review. Thank you for being a part and parcel of this broadcast this morning. Let me introduce the panel that will take us through the biggest economic headlines that you are waking up to this morning. We're joined by MELODIE NDANU, who's a research analyst at GENGHIS at Capital Limited. MELODIE, good morning.
Good morning.
Happy to have you around, MELODIE. We're also joined by Tommy Wendell, who is a policy analyst. Tommy, good morning, sir. Fantastic. We're also joined by CHACHA BICHANGÁ, who is financial literacy coach. CHACHA, how are you doing, sir?
Fine.
Fantastic, we're good. And then finally, JOASH ONSANDO is a public policy analyst and a political strategist. JOASH, good morning.
Morning, Simba, how are you?
Fantastic, happy to have you around. All right, let's get into that first story now, where Kenyans will have to dig deeper into their pockets after the fuel prices hit a record high in the latest review. According to the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, a litre of petrol in Nairobi will retail at 134 shillings and 72 cents, while the diesel will be going for 115 shillings and 60 cents. Kenyan households who depend on kerosene for cooking will now have to part with at least 110 shillings for a litre of the commodity. And the pump price is shot to the highest level in Kenya's history after the government stopped a subsidy scheme introduced in April this year to ease public anger over the high cost of living. Now, the high cost of fuel is likely to exert more pressure on Kenyans who are already confronting a battered economy thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. Just before we cross over to our analysts this morning, let's look at exactly where Kenyans are in terms of the reactions to the latest review by EPRA.
Mimi ni mtu wa bodaboda. Sasa imekuwa tena ni shida because customers wanalia. Mtu ukimwambia pesa, for example mali ya 100, ukimwambia mtu akuongezee 50 ataona ni ngumu because pesa kuna na mafuta ime increase.
Kwa mfano mimi naishi Juja, so kutoka Juja mpaka town before nilikuwa naeka 800 ama 1000. Nilikuwa najua niko 100% hiyo mafuta itanipeleka na nirudishe, umeelewa? Lakini kama leo unapata gari imenikatikia nini hapa Ngara, hapa nikiteremka gari imekata mafuta, umeelewa?
Town service ilikuwa 100. Now saa hii inafaa ni increase kwa 200.
Hiyo wiki imepita tuko tunalipishwa shilingi 50 na 70 labda. Sasa hivi nimekuja sasa tunaambiwa 100. Kama ni roka ni 100, bado naambiwa ni 130 wengine. Sasa sijui venye itakuwa namna gani, sielewi.
Ndio budget ingie. Chai lazima niache kwa sababu sasa chai sio nini, si lazima.
Hata kama utaenda vichochoroni kale 50, unaona.
Trying to get to terms with the latest review. Those are some of the reactions of the Kenyans that we spoke to here at Metropole Television. Again, let's look at that data this morning in terms of where we're coming from. And we're going to start from where our fuel levy has been. And we are cross-checking that fuel levy trend all the way from 2015 to 2020. Then the general trend is that it has been increasing. I mean, we're talking about an increase of more than 40%. I mean, we look at it from 2015 to where we are in 2019-2020, looking at exactly how much the government collects from the fuel levies in the country. Now, let's go back and see where we're coming from in terms of what the average has been in terms of our cost. And you will see that indeed for petrol, in 2018, we're talking about 111. That was the average. In 2019, we went back to 109. That was the average. And at 2020, we got to 103. That was the average. And at 2021, just before this latest review, we were talking about 122. Looks as if you might look like it is what? 7 shillings, but indeed it's 12 shillings when you consider the average. Same thing to diesel. We're talking about 103 in 2018, 102 in 2019, 93 shillings in 2020. That was the average. But now, 2021, 106. Now it's 115. So when you compare that with the latest review, then it's an increase of around 9 shillings to that. Kerosene as well, the biggest jump. The average in 2021 before the latest review was 96 shillings. You can see exactly where it is that we're jumping to now to 110, marking the biggest review when you compare those quarters. All right, let me pick the views of your Melodie this morning. And anybody looking at it, would I ask you, because we have been running on a subsidy program since April this year. How sustainable was that subsidy route that the government had taken back in April? Melodie, yes, we can get you now, yes.
In my opinion, it was largely ineffective.
Yes.
We've seen that and as the shilling weakens, it will only go trying to hold the fuel prices steady using the margin. However, it was actually supposed to cushion motorists from price. The program really worked. The main issue, mostly that has been put across by manufacturers, is the April, and which forms up to 0.5%, 50% of the pump. Find a lasting solution to this problem of price fluctuation.
Yes. All right, let me cross over to you, Josh. How sustainable is this fuel subsidy program that the country got into back in April? Should have they left Kenyans to the masses of the international price trends?
The subsidy only lasted one pricing cycle. So here we are.
Josh, can you confirm you can get me, sir? Quite a pity. Let me look for the view.
Yes, I can.
Oh, yes, you can, Josh, isn't it? Okay, can you start again because we lost you at some point?
Yes, as I was saying, the subsidy was underfunded, and that's why it only lasted one pricing cycle.
Yes.
We're dealing with a government that has very menial resources because a chunk of the money we collect is going to debt repayment, and the economy is not as productive as it should be for the level of debt we have. So then they have to collect money through taxes, and that's why you're seeing the obscene taxes being levied on petroleum products. So it's a pointer to a bigger problem. It's a pointer to a bigger problem, and it'll get worse before it gets better.
Yes. All right, I'll be coming back to you on that because we do know that KPC was supposed to be raided this month so that fuel subsidy could continue. But it looks as if Treasury then had two thoughts about that. Let's cross over to Tommy Rendo. Tommy, this fuel subsidy program that the country has been running on since April, how sustainable was it?
Like Joash said, it wasn't really underfunded, and I think there are better solutions than the fuel subsidy. We need to revisit how we price our petrol.
Yes.
And we need to look at it from the moment it arrives at the port. the refining process, all the way to how we price this, because we don't market economy type of system. It's hampered with by government. So
yes.
I think a review of that is also necessary.
Pretty much. I'll be coming back to that, because if you look at exactly what KPC was supposed to be rated into, they're even talking about adjusting the landing cost and the marketing per cubic meter. We won't talk about that. CHACHA, how sustainable was the fuel subsidy program that we've been running on since April?
Yes, indeed, the fuel subsidy program as sustainable. If the subsidy came into being, it's also from Kenyans as a result of the increase in fuel prices in the previous month,
yes,
preceding, let's say, April this year. And the government, as part of a knee-jerk reaction, had it produce a subsidy, knowing very well the government did not have enough actually capital base or reserves, but it went in as a way of trying to please Kenyans and pushing Kenyans from the high fuel prices. But as my colleagues have already said, it wouldn't last long because the government did not have enough money. So it boils down to coming up with other measures, like, for example, how do we price the oil, actually, right from actually the point of refining, the point that it's delivered to the market. And in fact, it is very surprising that now, once the subsidy is removed, we have an increment of around 80 shillings, actually, for the petrol prices and diesel. Kerosene has hit the common man harder. That means, indeed, the common man cannot be cushioned if the government does not work on improving this fiscal policy, improving on measures meant to put the economy on track, so that we can have more, let's say, we can have more sustainable subsidies in the near future. As it stands, we are staring at a bleak economic future.
Pretty much.
Thank you.
Now let me get back to you, Melody, so that we start looking at the options that we have. Just but before we get into that, I want to give you an update of how the Senate House reacted yesterday upon that April review, and this were the emotions, and this is exactly what they said.
Mr. Speaker, an increase in the fuel cost means an increase in food prices, means an increase of cost of production, means an increase of cost of transport.
Mr. Speaker, I want to call upon the committee and I request, Mr. Speaker, because it's the urgent matter. As we talk, Kenyans are suffering now. Almost a half of Nairobians are working. They cannot board a matatu or a border because the increment of fuel means there is an increment of price, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, on this particular issue, much as the Committee on Energy can lead us on the question, such is the matter that you invite the Committee of the Whole to sit through together with EPRA and the Ministry of Energy to come to the floor of this House and explain. Because, Mr. Speaker, when members of this House retreat to their constituencies this weekend, I can assure you, in every gathering that you will appear, people will want to lynch you because of the price that they are paying, even those who don't drive cars. You have heard that kerosene increased by a whopping 12 Kenya shillings. That has never happened before.
If you increase the price of oil by almost 8 or 7 and above, that's very high per liter. How many people can afford that?
Mr. Speaker, Kenyans out there ought to know, and I want to reiterate, that the Senate does not participate in passing taxes.
I want to seek your indulgence, honorable senators. This is a thorny matter, but I want to give this direction, that the Committee on Energy will spearhead.
That's it. So they decided that Tuesday next week is when they're going to summon the CS and his counterpart to sit down and then talk about this issue. Richie, if you don't have that inflation data, because that's exactly what I want to begin with Melody this morning, could you give it to us so we know exactly where it is that we're coming from? If you go by quarter and quarter analysis, you will see that in quarter two we closed at around what? 6 point something. We are now coming from 6.57. That's where we are. And if you look at where we are across the board, 2020, you'll find that we were at 5.4%. Fine. Melody, are we looking at inflation numbers that are bound to jump higher than what we do know is between 2.5 to 7% now with this latest review?
Well, in my opinion, I think the rate might just be below the 7.5% ceiling that has been set by the CBK.
Yes.
Looking at the composition of the consumer price index, the fuel and transport forms the second highest weighting, so there should be some impact felt. So if this continues, the cost of living going up, the CBK may just have to come and step in and make some changes to keep the inflation in check.
Fantastic.
There's also the possibility of increasing excise duty on fuel.
Yes.
Which had been announced by KRA to cover the inflation for that financial year, FY 2021. Though this now needs to be approved by Treasury to be effected on October 1st. So if these other changes keep on happening, prices of food going up, then we're going to see a significant bump in the inflation numbers.
Pretty much. So let's look at that, because I want to cross over to JOASH as well. JOASH, just before this latest review, I mean, APRA announced that they're going to rein into KPC, and then after that, get the money out of KPC for what was supposed to be a subsidy that was supposed to last us for the next 1 month. Looks as if Treasury shot that proposal down, but what we do know is that we're supposed to get upwards of 3 billion, what was supposed to go into the current subsidy. KPC, there was some booty that connects our neighbors in terms of that oil distribution network. Was that a good place to go to get this money for the subsidy?
The problem with this subsidy, Simba, is the money that was collected for the purposes of this subsidy, and we've been discussing this, I think this is the third time we're discussing it.
Yes.
And you remember the last time I told you I don't think that money exists, because they kept using the excuse of gazettement of a certain gazette notice. They did not need authorization from Parliament. If you need a gazette notice, all you do is you go to the government printer on Friday and you print it. I don't think it's such a complicated legal process. What the net result has been is that now we have a PR blunder, because this increase, if there was no subsidy in April, assuming there was no subsidy, then it would have been a marginal increase between the last cycle and this cycle.
Yes.
But because we had the subsidy, now we have such a significant interest. So if as government you're going into a subsidy system, and a subsidy system is necessary given the backdrop of COVID, if you decide to go that route, then you had better make sure that the funds are available and the fund is sustainable. And that is where I think Treasury dropped the ball.
Chacha, you hear exactly what Josh is saying, that it doesn't look as if we're even running on a subsidy program, because indeed, if there was a subsidy just before this latest review, then the increase could have been marginal as opposed to the figures that we're seeing now. Has it got its spot on?
Yes, Simba. If, as you said, there wasn't any subsidy introduced in April this year.
Yes.
Then, as already noted, that the marginal increase here would have been very little. But because of the subsidy, we are having a big difference and a very huge outcry from Kenyans. Why? It looks as if now the government is not taking care of the needs of the ordinary Kenyans, the consumers, who will suffer the brunt of the price increases in basic goods, in transport, and so on. So here the government here should have considered the impact of sustaining the subsidy up to the end of the year. But introducing it within a short period and then lifting it is actually making Kenyans more vulnerable. So this is a catch-22. The government maybe need to reconsider, introduce the subsidy or do away with it completely and we see how we can cope with the sharp increase in the fuel prices and the basic goods.
All right, Tommy Randall, let me bring you in on that so that you can give us the last views on exactly what is bound to happen. What we do know is that Kerry is also coming in with an inflation adjustment rate for the pump prices in the country that is supposed to kick in October. So that means that, again, we are going to see the prices rise further. But that notwithstanding, Tommy Randall, APRA did appear in Parliament. We do know that the President actually did call for a committee to investigate on exactly how APRA was pricing energy in the country. They appeared before the National House and they said, we are not overpricing. Where we are now as a country, we have no say when it comes to international prices and how they affect us here locally. Fine. But when you compare our EAC counterparts, you're going to say that, well, we are way far ahead in that price point difference. Tommy Randall, then, from a policy perspective, is there a way for us to have the prices revised backwards?
I think this energy committee in the Senate saw this coming, should have seen this coming a long time ago.
Yes.
So that when budgets were being made, this would have been planned in advance in such a way that it's phased in gradually and it doesn't hit Mwananchi so hard. So from a policy perspective, I think the oversight part of Senate Energy Committee, who are acting very upset here like they didn't see this coming, could have done better and have dropped the ball.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
Melody, clear for us this one. Indeed, would you expect, yes, you say it might be within range, 2.527, fine. But then what sort of regulatory response do we expect to see from CBK?
Well, for the CBK, they look at various factors before reviewing its rate.
Yes.
That's mainly things like export, foreign reserves, and government revenue performance. So in my opinion, if the inflation rate doesn't go above the limit, it might retain the rate at 7%,
Yes.
the CBR rate.
Yes.
So mainly we saw the government did this last year, reducing the CBR and CRR rate so that it can stimulate private sector growth, which has been punching below its weight. Also, the core inflation has been relatively stable, just below the 3% mark because of depressed demand. So it's just to wait and see how these inflation figures will look. But those are the few factors that the government, the CBK rather, looks at before making a rate change.
Fantastic. All right, let's go on a break like this. I will just need a one answer response from all of you because it's a conversation point that this country has been having for time memorial. The government is trying to find ways to penetrate credit to the private sector. They come up with guarantee schemes, but then again, they have taken these guarantee schemes back to the banks for the businesses in the country to go to the banks and get this money from these banks. That's where my question comes from. And Joash, just one answer from you. A guarantee scheme that goes through a bank, let me rephrase it, a guarantee scheme from the government that goes through the bank to lend to the SME. Is that a guarantee scheme, Josh? Just one answer from you.
It is one of the ways you do a guarantee scheme.
Fantastic. I'll be coming back to you on that. Melody, a guarantee scheme that goes through a bank from the government so that MSMEs can go back to the bank so the bank can decide if they want to give them the money or not. Is that a guarantee scheme by basic definition?
In my opinion, I believe it's still a guarantee fund because the
yes,
government
Melody,
is using
I'll be coming back to you on that. You think it's still yes is? All right, CHACHA, is it a guarantee scheme? Going by exactly what I'm asking Melody this morning.
Well, a guarantee scheme comes with some free sessions
yes.
or conditions. When you pass it through to a bank, not a guaranteed scheme.
Fantastic. I'll be coming back to you all night. Good that I'm getting one answer that is not with Joash or Melody. All right, Tommy Randall, let's go on a break with you. Guarantee scheme from the government that goes through the bank, so the bank can decide who to give money or not within that scheme. By basic definition, is that a guarantee scheme, Tommy Randall?
I think so, but the incentives maybe are not for banks to be able to take on more risk while lending out more.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to come back and then get a comprehensive response from all our panelists today, because indeed reports by Parliament Budget Office now, BPO, show that banks were not willing to give the money that they were given from the government to lend to the MSME sector in 2020, despite the government being ready to tell them, we are going to take care of a part of the non-performing loans that were going to happen in 2020. Why can we not crack this, even with guarantee schemes, once we come back here on a Business AM?